It's easy to hear your favorite artist on WFPK from wherever you are. Listen on your smart speaker, live stream from our website at WFPK.org from Louisville Public Media.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with the interview series presented by WFPK, Independent Louisville at WFPK.org. Consequence of Sound, the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. And for all of you all who tune in to the multiple episodes every single week with new interviews released every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in all of the popular podcast destinations, which includes, of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Acast, or wherever you prefer. I'd like to thank all of you all for checking those out, and especially for those who subscribe to the podcast and occasionally leave us some comments about what you dug about the interview or have some questions or ratings, reviews. Always appreciated. I am Kyle Meredith, and today my guest of Montreal, going to be talking with Kevin Barnes about the new record called You're Fun. It's, as he says, an 80s inspired record. It is a lot of fun to listen to this one. Pop songs throughout, but not without plenty of layers. In fact, we're going to be talking about a lot of those from the political side, especially when you draw the parallels between what was happening in the 80s in pop culture versus the politics to what's happening now in pop culture versus politics. Kevin will tell you there is a definite line from there to this record, but also about how it's affecting all of us in the mental health avenue. In fact, even beyond the generalizations in that market, Kevin Barnes also will tell us about experiencing dissociative disorder. It's not anything that I was familiar with beforehand, so we're going to get the story on that as well, how it affects his daily life, but how it also encourages his music. And being a fan of Montreal also means a little bit of homework if you want to dig into the songs. Kevin always kind of slides in some really interesting cultural references in various forms of media, whether it's artists, literature, film. So I'm going to ask about how that ties into the biography that he's also writing about in those very same songs. Beyond all of this, he was also producing the latest Locate S1 album at the same time. So we'll hear about how the two projects actually talk to each other, even complement each other. So time to jump into it, discussing the record You're Fun. It's Kyle Meredith with Of Montreal.
Hey, how's it going?
I've so enjoyed listening to the new record, You're Fun. You're Fun? I can't pronounce the you're too hard on that one. On this one. I mean, it is a really fun record, and as I've read a couple things about it, this one finds you going about it alone instead of like big collaborating, and if that's the case, do you go into a project kind of choosing that, or does it sort of start happening naturally?
Yeah, it's more of a choice. I do have a handful of people that if I could work it out with their schedules, I could incorporate into what I do. But this record, I wanted it to be more personal, and I kind of wanted to just take my time with it and not have to think about anybody else's schedule or anything like that. So that's kind of the reason why I did it by myself.
I was going to ask if that has anything to do with the type of music you hope to get out of it too. I mean, with certain types you'd want to collaborate, but does the pendulum swing for you, I guess? Is it ever a reaction to a previous project? Like, that was fun, now I've got to do something on my own.
Yeah, usually if there's an experience that felt really good, but just something I don't want to take a break from, then I would react to it in that way. They made two records, Lazio, Sylvian Breyer, and Ariat Gloom, and parts of the following record, Innocence Reaches, with the same group of people. And then after that, I kind of wanted to get back into challenging myself to make something by myself, and so kind of did that with the last two records.
As I look back at some of those previous albums and projects, you never seem to shy away from citing influences or sounds that you were looking for to get a project started. This time, I think two of the names that have cropped up, especially of Cyndia Lauper and Janet Jackson. And if that's the case, do you specifically seek out inspiration to get a record? I mean, some artists enjoy the parameters, like, oh, this time I'm going to make a fun 80s pop record.
Yeah, the influences seem to kind of organically sprout around me, and I don't really, I guess it's hard to say, if they choose me or if I choose them. It's kind of nebulous, where the sources of inspiration come from. But yeah, I guess when I start to feel that I'm moving in a certain direction or that I want to move into a certain direction, then I'll sort of seek out reference points. And in this case, it was mid-80s pop music that for some reason was speaking to me.
Don't think anybody's going to complain about that too. I mean, it never feels like a bad time. I was talking with someone the other day about the '80s, and you hear about, oh, the '90s have come back around and the '70s have come back around, but I never hear that line so much about the '80s because it doesn't feel like in some ways it ever leaves us. Like we're always sort of like connected in there somehow.
Yeah, I think the 70s definitely feel, I mean, the 80s can feel like this anachronistic time period that we can't identify with, but I think that there are a lot of aspects of 80s culture that, like you said, have just sort of followed us into current day. And I mean, especially I feel like the Republican Party is responsible for that in a lot of ways, because I mean, and that's the weird thing about like the mid 80s, it's like you're into your second Reagan term, and in a lot of ways, conservative America is as strong and influential as it had ever been and maybe will ever be. And so there's, going to be a sort of reaction to that and a rebellion against that. And I kind of feel like with the Trump era that even like in a more like intense way, it's sort of, or it kind of mirrors that time period in a lot of ways.
And that, I guess, pops up a lot within this record as well, especially, in that first single with Peace to All Freaks. In the comparison with the 80s, I think the nice part is, to quote that term from you, the freaks, we get to be louder than ever, probably thanks to social media and the internet and everything, but also so is the opposition. And maybe that's what you mean by it's more intense. Well, I think I think we all know what you mean by more intense and everything, but that's encouraging to me. I don't know, is the same to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of funny, like when you go to other countries that have less hatred and less toxicity in their cultures, that everyone seems like really chill and healthy, but there's like a madness that you miss. Like there's something in the United States, even though it's like a pretty volatile brew, it's like it is inspiring in this weird way, just everyone living very loudly and everyone, sort of screaming to have their voice heard. It's kind of, I think there's a reason why so much great art, so much great music and filmmaking and novel writing happens in the United States, because it is a really fucked up place to live.
And apparently to die in, and with possible tongue-in-cheek or irony in play. How does "Don't Let Me Die in America" possibly play into what you're saying?
There's like a whole side to American life, American culture that is extremely upsetting for somebody that is sort of more on the pacifist side of things, and in the includes, wanting to include everybody and not necessarily include toxic people, but include the sort of marginalized people more into society and sort of prop people up and, power to the people, sort of having that sort of agenda. It's kind of difficult sometimes when you feel like how is Tucker Carlson still allowed to open his mouth, and
right.
How is Mitch McConnell still in a position of power, and, how are all these just really moronic people allowed to have influence over my life and other people's lives. And so, yeah, it's just kind of a reaction to that. It's like, God, don't let me die here. These people, these horrible people. But then at the same time, there's like incredible people. There's Laurie Anderson, there's Angela Davis, there's so many people that are inspiring that have inspired me that are American. So in any way, hate the country just out of hand. There's just like parts of it, aspects of it that I really hate and find really toxic.
As someone existing in Kentucky, from Kentucky, I cannot throw the apologies out. Not that I had anything to do with Mitch McConnell, but we're trying our best to,
Yeah, I know, man. We're from Georgia, so it's like they're not much better.
Oh, I did like how you, it was probably on Twitter or something, you threw out some apologies to the cities that you meant no harm, or you meant nothing personal anyway to the actual cities mentioned in that song.
Oh, yeah, totally. Because, I mean, I'm from like Rocky River, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland. And so I'm not I've never really lived in like a major metropolitan city, so I have no claim. I can't say that I'm actually from anywhere cooler. I'm from the Jacksonvilles. I'm from the Cincinnatis. I'm from those worlds. So that's how I know them so intimately. And, it's kind of might feel like a cheap shot, but that's kind of, I'm sure everybody who lives in it would identify with that,
Right. Well, with all of this kind of inundating us, it does seem like, well, thanks to more voices being heard, but also of a shared experiences, we're all dealing with various signs of mental health every day. That also seems to play a big part in here, whether it's in titles like Deliberate Self-Harm, haha, or in the lyrics. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to make is finally it does seem like that's a bigger part of the conversation, which is really great news. And how did you approach that part of the record, and was there any agenda?
No, it's just a reflective state of mind in my personal life. And, the stuff I write is very autobiographical and universal or write something that people can identify with. It's more just me expressing what I'm going through and using music as a form of therapy to sort of work my way through things. But yeah, I mean, it's funny, you're fun, and there is definitely a lot of positivity and buoyancy to it. But then there's also kind of the other side of the coin with kind of the second half of the record. It gets a bit darker.
You mentioned that, part of that being experiencing dissociative disorder, which isn't anything that I knew anything about. And could you shed some light on what that is?
It's a pretty vague concept. I'm sure a lot of people would have different experiences, but I think the one thing that maybe would tie them all together is this sense of unreality and just this feeling that either you're in a simulated reality or you're on some sort of psychedelic trip or you're in some dream world, and just sort of this detachment from what other people or what you've been sort of trained to believe is reality. And I wonder, I feel like more and more people are experiencing it. And I think that one of the reasons would be, you can't really blame it on the internet because people have obviously had dissociative feelings for centuries. But I think like the internet kind of maybe heightens it and exaggerates it a bit in people's minds because you're sort of always being drawn into this other reality where you're absorbing so much pain and so much information that would never be in your physical world. So I feel like it's hard for your mind to really process it all and compartmentalize it all and put it into a place that makes any sense. And so I think it kind of makes me at least like kind of go haywire.
Is that something that affects like your daily life, like daily existence?
It has. I'm on antidepressants that have helped that a lot. So when I was not on the meds, I was kind of shooting around all over the place, and it was hard to feel normal, feel good, feel any sort of equanimity. So I'm definitely in a better place now. So it hasn't really affected me. It's not crippling or anything like that.
Well, not to make light of the situation at all, but I think given what we have to deal with every day in the news, it might be helpful to to go through some kind of dream state to get through it. I mean, I think we're all looking for some kind of escape is what I'm getting to. Yeah,
I guess the thing about it is not really like escapism. It's not like a healthy form. It's more because it's upsetting. It's an upsetting feeling, and so it's kind of like maybe connected to like an acute anxiety disorder or something like that. But as far as escapism is concerned, that's like where music comes into play. That's where the creative process comes into play for me. And that's really the most therapeutic exercise that I have is when I go into the studio or when I'm working on a song or I'm working on some video art or whatever it is.
And one of the most fun things about being, a fan of what you do and of Montreal is sort of the, I don't know if Easter egg hunting is the right word, but you put a lot of references in here. And most of the time I am not aware of what those references are until somebody points it out. And then I get to go discover something that you're talking about. And the question is, the art of mixing cultural references with your own biography. Like, is there a challenge there? Because a lot of the times you are talking about things that you're going through, but you're using these, these pieces of art that aren't, we're not, most of us aren't aware of, right off the bat and making it work for your own life.
Yeah, well, I guess a lot of times if there's a reference to something in art, music, cinema, or whatever cultural reference, it's something that I've just discovered myself. And so that's like the part of my writing that is almost like journal entry writing, and that it's like, oh, I discovered this new dancer today, or I discovered this new performance artist, or I discovered this new author, whatever it might be. And so the music or the lyrics are very deeply connected to my personal experiences, and often the albums themselves are like diaries from a certain period of my life.
And just on the side note, too, along with your fun, we sort of almost get like two at one here because you produced the new Locate S1 album, right?
Correct.
Which, is a bit, it's all in-house is what I guess I'm trying to say. This is your partner here. Was that all done at the same time? Was there sort of separation that went on with that?
No, I mean, there was a bit of separation. She was working on the songs. We were working on the songs around the same time period, and we recorded some of the songs at the same time that I was working on Year Fun. And then once I finished Year Fun, that we sort of dove headfirst into finishing her record, Personalia. So yeah, in a lot of ways, they're deeply connected. They're sort of like sister records in my mind, and it was kind of like the same energy, the same spirit. I feel like was flowing between both of them.
I do love the moment on of course, You're Fun. She pops up on Gypsy That Remains, which, again, I do feel like some definite 80s hooks happening in there, but that's a really fun song to hear, too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that one was very ABBA-inspired.
I love finding all of that. Oh, cool, man. I can't compliment you on this new record enough. Your Fun is so much fun to listen to. And then dig deep and find out that, even when the subjects aren't fun, it's a full experience is what it ends up being. So thank you for the music on this. And thank you for taking the time today to talk, too.
Yeah, man. Thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. We will see you around.
Perfect.
Right.
See you later. Have a good day.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
My thanks to Kevin Barnes of Montreal. The new record is called Your Fun. Also, thanks to you for checking out this episode. Again, hopefully you subscribe to the series so you can keep up to date on all the interviews that we put out. A new one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. If you're into that type of thing, just head to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Acast, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast from. Type in Kyle Meredith with and hit subscribe. We'll take care of the rest from there. After that, head to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. An hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, and bonus interviews too. Again, that's WFPK.org. Consequence of Sound has your music and film news. You can find me on any social media platform at Kyle Meredith. And that does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.
I'm Lior Phillips, host of This Must Be the Gig. We're a weekly podcast that documents everything about the world of live music, speaking with choreographers, costume and set designers, the people who run beloved venues and festivals, and, of course, speaking with musicians about that one gig that changed their lives. Get your peek behind the curtain at consequenceofsound.net, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.